I'm Brandon.
And I'm Brandon.
And welcome back to Apollo City Comics, your now comic book conversation show. Let's just do that now. No longer the commentary show for at least another month. But today, once more, we have a very special guest, and it's kind of been leading up into this. You remember Charlie Ragnarok? You remember Patrick Hickey Jr.? All those great conversations we had. And today, the guy that's one of the main hombres running the show, but founder and writer of lesser-known comics, we have Mark. Thank you for joining us, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
But I'm super excited to talk to you. You know, we've been talking to people who are writing and drawing for lesser known comics, and we've invested a bunch of time into just checking out all the great work. And, you know, I've told all the guests this over the last couple of weeks, but we really use this show to kind of not only for Brandon and I to network as creators, but to try to get, you know, people out there and get people who are up and coming just to, you know, a little voice, you know, a stepping stone to just have an interview and just, you know, get their work exposed. And they wouldn't have been on the show if it wasn't for you. So thank you for everything you're doing with Lesser Known. It's kicking ass. But where did it come from? Tell me the origins of Lesser Known Comics.
So like everybody else that was like stuck in lockdown and quarantine, you know, you got a lot of time to contemplate your life decisions and where you want to go. Mm-hmm. It's crazy how many people are like reassessing like what they want to do with their career now. They're reassessing their family life. I've always had like a creative streak. I've done some creative writing. I wrote music and things like that, but always wanted to do some sort of storytelling. I thought comics would be easier than doing like a novel, and that was not.
Oh man,
I learned that in school too. Yeah,
I learned that the hard way.
This should be way I could do this, and then you start working on it, and you're like, what?
Yeah,
panels. You can't just do anything.
Yeah, and not only that, but I think I don't know if other writers had this, you know, issue too. Things that would make sense in cinema or maybe in a novel, you know, just won't make sense in sequential art. And then understanding, the book in terms of like how it physically feels and what you can do with that turn page reveal. Like, you know, it's a unique medium that way. But I had, you know, a story idea, and I was like, hey, you know, like maybe I'll make a graphic novel. Got talked out of that idea because it was like, well, no, you should start smaller, Mark, especially if you never made a comic before. I started working with artists on mini comics, and then all of a sudden, one day I woke up and we're having a meeting with, you know, 14 people. You know, and it's turned into a publishing company, you know, just all in an effort to feed the beast of trying to get like these stories told and work with more and more artists that, you know, I found to be just like a delight to work with. So none of this was intended. It's kind of grown out of control, but it's been really fun. I'm super glad to have run into the artists that kind of, you know, forced my hand to say, okay, no, like, let's make this something bigger than you originally, you know, intended it to be. So I feel really blessed about that.
No, were all the creators and artists people you knew previously, or a lot of these just kind of connections you've ended up making as the company came together?
Yeah, I put out just like, what's it called? Like hey, I'm looking for a comic book artist. I knew zero comic book artists in November of 2020 when this thing started. And now the amount of comic book artists I talk to, you know, my wife will give me a hard time. She'll be like, oh, are you actually working today? Like all I hear is you like laughing and like, you know, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I talk to professional comic book artists all day long. We have a pretty great time. It's
So what's you know, right now, the Kickstarter recently ended for volume 2, basically like of kind of a volume 2 of like an anthology book that you guys are kind of putting out. that format that you have out, it's kind of like that zine heavy metal format, just like 4 to 5, like 8-page stories, and it's from various artists and writers. Is that your guys' long-term goal, to have an anthology like style? Or are you looking to do single issue 24, 22-page issues coming out?
So we call them batches. We release everything in these batches. So the next one is very close. We may actually get batch 3, the digitals for it, ready here in the next couple of weeks. But they're all intended to be like extended trailers for what will eventually be, 22-page full issue comics.
Okay.
So especially the ones, so Condry, the one that Patrick's doing, we got Condry 0, 1, 2. So I think after number 4, they'll start doing 22 pages. So just stay under the name Condry. The lesser known comics ones, those are just seemingly random events that happen within the lesser known universe. The
cool.
Characters from those stories will have their own titular roles where they're like, in their own series, that will be 22 pages. And we'll plan those story arcs come this October, and they'll start in January. So each one of our illustrators will take on one of those story arcs. And right now they're just kind of doing these short ones just so we get reps in to be like, okay, like there's so much that even, those folks who, went to school for this, you don't realize, right? Like things like, like I shouldn't embedded those word balloons.
Oh yeah.
I did it at the wrong point, and you learn some of that stuff. You learn things like, sorry. You learn things like, I thought we were working all off the same illustration template. We were not, and learning things about, getting things ready for the printer and what that all requires. So they've always been intention to be, those trailers and those sneak peeks into future stories. But at the same time, it also gives us a chance to learn the hard lessons, because recovering from a mistake on a 5-page comic is much easier than recovering from a mistake on a 22.
Totally. Yeah. When you start like a comic book or I guess a publishing company in general, you don't realize the little ins and outs that you don't really pay attention to as a consumer. There's that whole, like a quick reference, there's that whole thing with like the Image guys. When they left DC and Marvel, they were writing and marketing and publishing, and that's when everything was falling apart, because they didn't realize, it's a lot of work to get your books published in a warehouse and shipped out properly.
Yeah, totally. Little things. Our first comics that we sent to print, love how they look. But then I realized, I was like, oh shit, our website's nowhere to be found on these books.
Oh, dang.
We got 2,000 books without a single reference to our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or our actual website. And I was like, well, that's a mistake, that and you just learn that from doing it, so
basically trial and error.
Yeah.
And so what kind of directed you to go the business aspect? And I mean, it sounds like you wanted to be a creator from the start, but what routed you into running the company?
I think like we talked about in previous conversation about I was in the Army for close to 20 years, getting out, and that was a type of career where it's like you get sent away for a long period of time, and you could also you can't bring your daughter to work,
Yeah.
And so I'm looking at the sorry, that's Buffy in the background, man. He's chooses this time. But yeah, I wanted to pick a career where, it's something that, I could share that, with my daughter, that I could have a lifestyle that's, whether, it's, going to conventions, that's something that I can do, and bring, kids to and whatnot. So, so I just saw an opportunity there to kind of jump on creating a lifestyle that would work better for me and my family than what I currently have.
Oh, nice.
Understandable.
Yeah, That's a motivating factor for sure. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, and that's kind of what everyone realized, especially in that COVID era, that switchover is just like, oh, I get to like be with my family. Like, I could kind of save money in a lot of aspects and just like raise my children and not commute and stuff like that. Like, it's kind of the way it almost should be, you know, like you want to raise your family, you want to be around for your kids, and you want to see some of those moments happen. And when it doesn't matter what you're doing, if you're gone for 8 to 10 hours a day just commuting and working, it's hard to like have that going on.
Yeah, I'm running into a lot of entrepreneurs, like, you know, that are kind of in their mid 30s, who've been successful at something else. And they're like, I'm not doing what my dad or my mom did, where they killed themselves at this job. You know, they'd come home in a bad mood because they worked, you know, 8-9 hours, then sat in traffic for 2 hours to and from, you know, estranged from their own kids. And then, you know, I mean, that was a story of like, you know, what my father, you know, I never had a good relationship with, you know, with my dad, you know, you know, a lot of that, you know, it's his own personal failings, but also the fact that like, yeah, if I had to work the lifestyle that he was working, I'd be in a pissed off mood all the time too.
Yeah. It's a grind, especially, and just trying to, you know, and that goes into a whole political conversation where it's just like, you know, wages aren't what they should be, and trying to just support like yourself and a family, it gets harder and harder every single year.
The work week, how it's like detrimental to like all parts of your body and health.
Yeah.
2 days off compared to the 5 days of working, not the greatest balance, right? Amongst anything else.
But it's also from like another perspective too, because like, can you imagine being a kid and like you get to go to like a convention because your parent works in comics? Like how great that must be when you really think about it. Like, yeah, my dad writes comics, so he had to go to Comic-Con. I got to go along, and you know, he bought me a pretzel, and I got to go walk around for 5 hours.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things, like from the other perspective, it's even better, in my opinion, like what you could do with that.
I love that kind of food, by the way. Like, if there's like, that's how like my wife can get me to go like to the mall or IKEA or something like that. Just if there's a snack involved, like I'm there. You know, it doesn't matter what we're doing.
I call it carnival food. The chicken tenders and burgers and deep fried Twinkies and giant soft pretzels and stuff.
Yeah, if they had that at the DMV, like people wouldn't mind it. I'd go to that.
Well, we got hot soft pretzels at the DMV, nacho cheese dip and all.
Yeah, I'd be like, cool, my number's not getting called. I think I got time for some chili cheese nachos.
Yeah. You might be onto something here.
Revolutionizing DMVs now, just one step at a time, to sponsor lesser known. Well, what got you into comics? I mean,
that's the big question.
What was your starting point? Who were kind of your first reads, and what was your gateway into this whole realm?
So like a lot of people, it's funny. I was talking to a bunch of creators yesterday, and they all said, "Oh, it was the X-Men Saturday morning cartoons, you know, in the '90s." That was it for me. Like I played soccer as a kid, you know, so it was like that's where I wanted to be on Saturday mornings. Yeah. Until I saw X-Men and Spider-Man, I was like, oof, this, I'm torn now.
Yeah.
And, you know, not a lot of money growing up as a kid. So, you know, getting access to actual comics, you know, was kind of a rarity.
Yeah, it's always, I always tell people like the hardest part about being into comics as a kid is the price. Like, I can't tell you the amount of random Spider-Man stories I read because I had to get the dollar bin comics and everything's just out of order.
So, you know, what I compare it to now is that, so I'm like rereading the X-Men in like chronological order.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
And it's like getting like the Zack Snyder cut times a billion, because it's like just all these, like, I know the story, right? Yeah. But there's just so much deleted scenes that I've missed out since 1990, you know, or whatever. What got me back into it was when they put when they made the Watchmen series on HBO.
Okay.
And I said, I better reread the comic because it's based on the comic, you know, not the movie. And then I was like, comic, I can kind of afford comics now.
Yeah.
You know, like then. So. And then then now that's what I do before bed every night. You know, I take a melatonin and read comics till I pass out.
He fell for the trap. It was like, I could afford comics. He's like, oh no, it's like $100 a week for my pool list now.
Yeah, it's I mean, I remember when I was getting comics as a kid, my dad got me like a bundle pack from Toys R Us, and it was just a bunch of random Marvel books like X-Force and Cable and stuff like that, and it was like the most bizarre start to comics. And you're just like, well, I mean, and going to a comic shop, not knowing how that whole universe works as a kid, you're even more baffled. You're like, how does this even come out every month? Like, how is that a thing? Like, and yeah, that price point, as a child, it's not going to happen. Now, I mean, it's a bit more accessible, but in the 90s, early 2000s, even then, I live in El Paso, Texas, so comic book shops were kind of scarce around here. We have like 4, like in total. And yeah, it's one of those things. So
I had that thing where, like, you know, growing up in San Francisco, there's quite a few comic book stores here. Everybody was just always rude to me. Maybe I was just a terrible kid in the comic shop, but I had comic book store owners that were just mean. Like,
yeah, there was one lady at a shop that would just smoke cigarettes in her shop all the time. And she would yell at you if you touched the book, saying it's not a library. And you're like, but I just want to see what it looks like.
But the cigarette smoke is destroying the covers.
Yeah, so why does it matter?
Yeah, I think, there used to be a model, like a business model where it was, like you could used to find like some X-Men comics or, you know, some Batman comics at the grocery store, or you could find them and that whole, you know, that whole business plan was, the kids will be in the grocery store annoying their parents, you know, and then their parents will get them the comic book just to shut them up. And then the kid will get addicted to comic books, and then they'll go to the comic book shop for the hard stuff, you know, like that, you know, beautiful business model. And I think, DC and Marvel have kind of gotten away from that, you know, because one, they're like super focused on, you know, licensing and film. But I think that's why the readership, you know, the young readership is suffering now, because they're, you know, they need to put, you know, comic books somewhere where kids, you know, parents are buying them as an impulse buy just to get, you know, their kids to shut up.
With that, and they have like those Walmart packs, but there's so many. The collector market is like none other nowadays, and you know, every 30, 40-year-old, 50-year-old is running to Walmart when they're doing shipment to get those Walmart packs, because there are different covers and whatnot. So it's like you're taking it from the kids when they're trying to get it. You know, that's why it's at Walmart. Like, just go to your shop and buy that stuff. But
yeah, that's a tough part too, because Walmart's not going to do signings, right?
No,
they're not going to do, you know, so, you know, I think it's real short-sighted of those companies to, you know, I think it's totally fine to put comics in a Walmart, but you need to leave something for local comic book shops that they're going to have exclusive to. Going exclusive to a grocery store is a little ass backwards, in my opinion. But I'll get off my soapbox. You know,
can you imagine? Hey guys, Grant Morris is doing a cross-country signing at every Walmart lineup.
That's freaking insane, Jesus.
But so if you don't mind me asking, like, were you you said the Watchmen show basically was when you got back into it? And that was, or your starting point to getting back into it, right?
Get back into reading them, yeah.
Back into reading them. That wasn't too long ago. That was like, what, 3 years ago at this point?
2018 or something like that, I want to say.
Yeah, it happened, you know, pretty much. I started rereading it. And then when lockdown happened, right, I'm like, gotta find like a new form of entertainment. Gonna get back into comics. And I think, you know, that's what spurred me to be like, okay, well, maybe comics would be a good outlet for, you know, the creative writing, because, you know, I've always loved them.
Yeah.
You know?
So that's what I was gonna ask next. Was there always this kind of like intention in the back of your head, like you always wanted to write comics, like, or maybe when you were younger you kind of drew like panels, or was it one of those things that you're like, I got this idea, I don't got a film production to use, so I'm just gonna make a comic, you know?
Yeah, it's a little bit of that. I definitely made my own like books when I was little, you know, like
It's okay. Everybody loves dogs. Yeah, don't worry.
This is the quietest my dogs have been in like 5 episodes.
He's usually quiet. He's I've heard him bark. He's a brand new puppy. I've heard him bark all of like 4 times, and two of it tonight. So,
here, folks. 2 of them marked down in history.
But to answer your question, I used to make like little books and make up characters and stuff like that when I was little. But yeah, I think when I got into music, that kind of like fell to the wayside, the creative writing part of it, because that's where my creative expression was. But when I was doing music, I was writing lyrics and whatnot, so that was kind of like my outlet for let me just throw all my teen angst that way.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I went that same route. I was really into reading, and then you come high school, I learned how to play bass, and then you're like, oh, well, everyone thinks that comics are lame, but people like music, so I'm gonna write this track as long as possible. And also, comics became cool again for some because of Marvel, basically Marvel films.
What did you play?
I played guitar and I sang.
Right.
Yeah, and like a punk ska band. I was actually like really into like kind of more like ska and pop punk. And,
nice.
Oh hell yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Right,
that's right.
Give me a quick top 5. I gotta know. That's like my bread and butter for music.
Oh, okay. So what I usually ask people is, if you hit shuffle on your playlist, like what's most likely to pop up, and it would be like No Effects,
yes,
Mad Caddies, Real Big Fish.
Yes. Hell yeah.
I'm trying to think who else would. But then, Charlie makes playlists. Wow. So that's one of the other things. So Charlie, so there was like a lot of Distillers on the playlist she shared with me.
I saw them live recently.
Awesome. We got back together.
Yeah. I saw them. They opened for Misfits when I flew to LA to watch Misfits.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, which was really random. It was like them and like Rise Against of all bands for Misfits. I was like, sure.
Yeah. It's cool for them at least. Yeah, dude, bands like Streetlight Manifesto, The Slackers, all that type of stuff. That was a huge, especially as a bass player, you know what I mean? That stuff, Fat Mike does that triplet thing where he kind of just goes in circles, and it's super dope. Right up our alley. Like, right up,
I love Real Big Fish for like over a decade at this point. I saw them live at the last Warped Tour ever, and I was just like, man, I think this is all they tour still.
I saw them like a year and a half ago with and them and Anti-Flag toured, and they came through here.
Oh, nice.
I saw that tour as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Brandon and I went to a similar tour as well 1 year. We both saw Angels.
3.
Yeah, we saw Angels and Airwaves.
Angels and Airwaves. We saw Iron Maiden, and then there was.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so funny enough, you bring up Warped Tour. I bring up Warped Tour as an example a lot. So coming into the publishing scene, we see indie comics the same way that we see the music scene, the indie music scene from the early 2000s. I think what's happening in indie comics right now, it's almost like exactly the same. If you think of it like, oh, some stuff's going on Netflix. It's like that same time where like Mighty Mighty Boss Tones like kind of got on the radio, right? And people are like, oh, like what's this guy? Save Ferris is like doing like little cameos in movies, right? And shit, right? So then there's Warped Tour, right? And then everyone had that same Hellcat compilation. Everyone had that same Punk-O-Rama compilations. And that's why we're doing like the digital comics for free. We're thinking, well, if we give away enough free comics, in whatever ways that possible, those minis, then that paid such huge dividends for Epitaph Records and Hellcat Records, all those. So that's kind of the model we're following. And then we also want to have that same like sense of community, like I don't know if you've ever gone to like one of those punk rock karaoke's at the end of like a Warped Tour.
Oh yeah.
But it's like that's what I'd like to see among the indie creators and stuff like that. We see a little bit of that, but I don't think we have as much of a venue to celebrate the artists as much anymore. Because I think the cons are kind of getting a little focused on the film. and that's fine. You know, film's cool, you know, but we're missing.
Why it was there, the start,
yeah.
purpose, you know, like your theme, you know.
It says it speaks a lot of volume when, you know, when I went to the Comic-Con I met Brandon at, I remember distinctly having a game plan, and the literal side of the convention center where all the actual comic book stuff is like so easy to maneuver. Meanwhile, the other side where you have like the Lego store or the Funko Pop store, and then like all the Marvel and DC booths and giant stages is like so packed you can't even move.
Yeah.
We're kind of I you know, and I think we're gonna avoid some of the bigger cons, you know, because I think that you know, I'm much more interested in, you know, some of those, you know, the smaller spaces where you can actually, like, you know, I've always been like a dive bar person. Like,
Totally.
I don't want to wait in line to go to a bar that I can't hear anybody talk anyway, and then pay like $15 for my drink that takes forever to get there, and it's super watered down.
Yeah, after paying the $25 cover charge.
Yeah,
you're not going for stadium fees. You're trying to get, you know, the local club. You know what I mean? Like, that like.
Yeah.
What are you guys looking to get into now that conventions are coming back? They're opening back up. There's opportunities everywhere. Have you guys targeted any in specific so far?
That is next on one of the next things on the to-do list. We're looking, you know, in January as kind of like our start. I know there's, you know, off the top of my head here, you know, I think there's a Phoenix one. I think there's one here in Maryland, and then there's some in Pennsylvania. We're gonna have to figure out like what our game plan is for each of the you know, the size conventions. You know, we'll probably, you know, do, you know, because how the type of resources you dedicate in your game plan going into like the one that's at like the ballroom at the DoubleTree Hilton versus like, you know, at a convention center. That's a very different, it's a very different scene, very different vibe. And we're a big team, you know, we got 14 people, so we may not fly that many people out to go to something that small.
You handle a certain amount depending on like, you know, what kind of center it is or whatever.
Yeah. Now, if they, you know, that's one of the things too is, you know, we're trying to be smart about like, oh, hey, you got family in that area you wanted to visit anyway, like, you know, like,
yeah, of course,
get a free flight.
It's kind of like you know, planning a tour and whatnot. Like when I was 18, 19 and we were touring half the country, it's just like, okay, we have people here, here, and here, those dates are covered, but we just need to find somewhere to stay here and here. We can make that doable somehow. Like, and it's literally, and I it's kind of funny that you related it so much, but the whole like punk rock like mythology, kind of that marketing plan and that planning aspect and the approach that everything had, it never clicked in my head how similar it is to an indie comic book starting up and how that formula can be applied the same way. It's basically the same concept. And you don't have like a G.G. Allen, like, you know, getting you attention. But I mean, that's like a crucial like way to go about it, especially in the marketing industry today. Like, it's hard to break out against, you know, even Image and Diamond and Dynamite. Like, those are players that you're going up against, and you know, for you to rise up to those levels, like, you kind of gotta maneuver, you know, very strategically to get that exposure out there.
I mean, just because they're not two major publishers doesn't mean you aren't going against some like heavy hitters too. You know, like Dark Horse and IDW have some pretty big properties too for being considered independent.
Yeah. I especially if you have a show on Netflix, you know, like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's it.
You're not small press anymore.
Yeah. Exactly.
And but that was great to see. I mean, like, you know, I was oddly a bigger fan of that second season of Umbrella Academy than the first one. But yeah, that was great. You know, the Invincible stuff was great.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm glad to see that, right? Because I, you know, you can only hear, you know, I mean, you can only do so many Marvel and DC stuff, you know, going back and forth.
Oh, definitely.
I do have a preference for Marvel, but
we're gonna get to that question soon. Don't worry.
Okay.
We try to avoid those publishers, but they always come back.
Yeah, it's always a flip flop. Like I could binge DC for a bit and then be like, you know what? All of a sudden I'm just like done, and I'm super into Marvel, and then all of a sudden I'm just like
they're always there. You don't got to worry about it being gone. That's why they're always there. I actually was gonna ask, now that you bring up, now that we're talking like other independent publishers, I do like to ask this about with independent writers and artists, just because I feel like when you get this opportunity, it kind of changes your perception on things. And say, you continue writing, you continue publishing, you're doing your thing. The company's growing, you're publishing more books, you got like more physical copies, shipping and everything. And then boom, you're hit with the email from Netflix or Hulu, and they're like, hey, we saw your property. We're interested in creating a TV show or movie, whoever it may be, whatever platform. Do you feel like, maybe down the line you change your mind considering how things could change, or like right now, would you just be like, yeah, I'd do it, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think it'd be amazing to do any of those, adaptations. I would have some pretty ridiculous stipulations for the contract. It'd almost be like separate from money. Like I'd be like, I want executive control of the soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Like
the soundtrack. There you go. Hey man, the soundtrack goes a long way.
Yeah. And then I'd make like a list of just I would find that all very, because I'm also not a person who's like, my story is my baby, you can't change anything about it, right? Mm-hmm. Like I would love to see somebody that I was excited about, that was a film creator, an animator or whatever, that was just like, oh, I want to do this with your story, I want to tell it in this type of thing. It's like when all of a sudden like with Thor Ragnarok, right? That's a much different Thor than we grew up with, and it was cool, and and then you have purists who are like, it's like, get over it, man. It's like it's fine.
Yeah, it's also a lot of money involved too. I mean, it's like you get that deal, and it's just like, oh yeah, $50,000 for one season, sure, that does change people, and the money's nice, of course. So I totally get it.
Yeah.
What were some of the publishers that you kind of got inspiration for lesser known, like kind of, based yourself around or, looked up to be like, I could reach this level and this is a goal I'd like to hit? Like,
well, from a modeling standpoint, we try and blend both. So we have creator-owned content. We base that like a lot, like Image would, where they don't own anything. So like Patrick or Charlie, the stuff that they've developed completely on their own, they own it. And what I would hope for them is that someday someone comes to them with a big wad of money, or a movie deal or something crazy, right? And they're able to go do that, no strings attached. Like we would just be happy that we were like the incubator for that, such a cool project. So, we follow that Image, like creator own model that way. And then we follow that Marvel method in the fact that when the illustrators come, that Stan Lee, Jack Kirby type of thing, where it was, okay, the only direction you had, like, Stan Lee would be like, we're going to have, Spidey fighting Doc Ock on top of a water tower. And that's like, and you let and you let the illustrator tell that story visually. So one of the issues we're working on right now, I needed a bunch of henchmen killed off. They're gonna go into a place that they shouldn't be, and they're all gonna get killed. I don't need to tell an illustrator like how to decapitate and destroy and dismember a bunch of henchmen. I just said, this is the first panel and this is the last panel. How you want to like destroy them, like that is on you.
Nice.
And what that particular illustrator Franco came up with, it was disturbing. and I got so much excitement seeing those pages, and I knew what was going to happen. So if I got that much excitement out of it, like then I got stoked for like the reader. I'm like, oh, they're going to really like this,
nice,
because I actually like cringed at one point. I was like, oh my god, poor guy, like I did not know someone could die that way or that vividly.
Yeah, it gives them a chance to tell the story, and you're both telling the story at that point. It's not just like, okay, I'm full script is the writers, the director, the everything, like the cameraman, like full on, just giving full direction. And if you can have that relationship, and also it builds both of your skills. Like you're not relying so much on one person and just a bit on the other. You're kind of very balanced in that sense. That's probably why Marvel's had so much success, is that they really rely on their illustrators to tell the story, and it could be a little convoluted at a certain point when it's just the writer trying to orchestrate everything. That sense of vision really needs to be in there too, and we can tell that a lot with some of the, especially with Charlie's work, very focused on the paneling and the pacing, and that's what comics are, paneling and pacing. That's without that you don't have a comic.
Hers was the first one we kind of that I kind of co-wrote with the artist. And my only regrets on that one, I think I could have done a little bit more with the story, but but it's fine. Like we're gonna it was always meant to be a snippet. We're gonna take that story, and do more with it. But I think what she did with that black, white, hot pink is so visually stunning. And that cover, that cover, like. I joke. I was like, I'm probably gonna get that cover tattooed. Like it's most likely. But it's been really fun to learn each different illustrator's things that they like to draw. So Andrea, he's really into like psychedelic type of artwork. So I gave him a script where the character has a near-death experience, and I was like, you have your way with like how what that and just blew me away, and so I'm getting better as a writer, creating that free space for them to to really play. Kieran, he does the art for Condry. We gave him a Mad Max meets Speed Racer type of script, where he's just able to draw cars exploding and flamethrowers and like rockets and all sorts of zany stuff, in it. And because I just saw his page, like his other sketches he does when he's not doing Condry, and I was like, oh, this guy can do, some out there stuff. So
that's awesome.
Tried to create that script to give him just a place where he can just have some fun.
Nice. That's cool that you're also really getting involved with your team in that sense too. I've seen a lot of just like publishers or indie work where it's just like there's an imbalance, and you could rightfully see that. But when we were looking at Condry and stuff like that, it looks like professional indie work. You know what I mean? Like this is publishable. This stuff like needs to be out there. Like these artists have talent, and you can tell the chemistry there. And especially with Condry, you could tell how much he got to play with the panel layout, and that's always the funnest thing ever when artists really get to dive in and just make a comic book and make all those crazy scenes and those movements and the backgrounds like elaborate and still drawing your focus to certain spot. That's what matters, and and of course, as you're writing, you need that practice too. You got to kind of see it in front of you to be like, okay, visually I could see what you could do better. So it's always that advancement.
It was it wasn't until I had a conversation with Kieran about the script I made for him that I learned about what Patrick's writing process was, because I gave a script to Kieran, and he was like, whoa, this is very different than what, Patrick does.
He told us about it in that interview, and it's basically like a novel that he gives him. And it's just like, okay, like Alan Moore style, practically, just laying it all on you.
Yeah. So I do. So Kieran gets to make the panels for that, for Condry. For mine, I do say, how I kind of want the panels arranged, but the contents of the panels, he's a lot of freedom on that portion of it, so it's but he's just such a versatile artist. I think you could throw anything at him and he's gonna have a lot of success with it. So just by virtue of the fact that Patrick's a great writer, that I think that title is gonna have a lot of success. And I think the first page of Conjury #1 is probably like one of my favorite pages I've seen in comics, with the line of, I need drama like I need drama in my life like I need a hole in my head.
Yeah.
Shit. Now I have both. Yeah. And I was like, I like it. It's
a good start. Yeah, no, for sure. It drew us in very fast. Like Conjury is going to be, we were even talking about, like, it has potential for like to be on screen. Like, it's that well laid out. Like it visually you could make that happen. You were saying right now, when you help arrange the panels. Now, do you mean like the placement, or do you basically just put like panel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Like, there's 5 panels on this page, and here's a small description, or is it literally just like you're kind of like, I have this flow, I want the panels to move in?
I have it, and I'll write it right in there where I'm like, I'm not sure if this is 1 or 2 panels, or whatever. But it's usually what I'm a stickler on is that each even page, that top left-hand side is a big reveal, and that every, bottom right-hand side of the odd page, has some sort of cliffhanger in there, something that makes the reader have no choice but to turn the page. So anytime someone's going to enter a room, or a what's that noise, or a holy shit, like, it's always there, so that you have to find out, what's the monster on the other side of that door, and to have that physically. And just, so I'll be a stickler about that, and other things, like in Abel, he did a batch 3 comic. So you guys haven't got to see his work yet, but there's one where one of the characters is holding a map, and when he goes to open that map to look at it, when you turn the page, it's like you're holding that map, so
there you go.
And that stuff excites me, because there's no other medium that's like that. You won't really have that in a novel, Nope. So that's the kind of things, like, I'll just insist on, but it usually makes it easier for the artist, rather than actually limits them, because then they know, okay, like, I'm going to focus, on essentially these two panels, and then everything else sets the scene between those 2 transition points.
How do you, now that you bring it up like that, the thing about, you have a panel and then you turn the page, how do you feel about your process when it comes to putting your stuff out there digitally? Like, when you write these scripts, do you tend to keep in mind that this is going to be digital and physical, or do you kind of go, well, better get the physical one if you want the true experience?
I mean, I kind of feel that way. I mean, I think unless I was going to do 2 different versions, one of those forms is going to have to take a little bit of a back seat. So to me, the digital is the one that's going to take a back seat, because that's just my own, like, I don't know, elitism towards physical copies.
Oh yeah, it's like Stan Lee said, comic books are like boobs. Like, they're great on print, but they're just better in your hands. Like,
yeah.
Just,
I hadn't heard that quote before.
The thing is, like, I can't imagine him saying it in his voice, like, "Hey, everybody, so,
true believers,
hey, true believers."
Yeah.
What was I gonna say? That was but yeah, no, I mean, the thing is, and I respect it, is that you are making your book, and you are making the experience you want people to have, and you're allowed to do that. If you want. If you want to say, hey, the big reveal is when you turn the page rather than scrolling your mouse, you're allowed to choose where you get that satisfaction. Do you want it in the physical, or do you want to accommodate the digital? And it's not like you're harming the digital version either. You're still having it out there for free, by the way. Like, it's still something that people can experience. And
yeah, they get printed out at home and make their own bootleg comic of Condry and everything.
Yeah,
so.
I mean that's really like the we certainly have no especially like that. It's like a compilation CD, like we were talking about with music. Like those were made to be burned like 20 times, and given out to your friends for free. Like if we're putting something like on a PDF, like forward those to your friends. Yeah, it's free reign, Like, it's like, what is it? System of a Down, like steal this album.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. That album was literally like, you couldn't even tell the difference between like a burn CD and like the actual release of that album.
Yeah.
Love it.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So what other avenues are you guys looking to explore? I know you have a podcast that you guys kind of started up too. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, just, I got a good friend of mine. He works at Sirius XM, and he was doing the road trips with me. So we were driving. I think we visited about like 34 comic book shops so far, maybe 38, something like that. So he was in the car with me all day. He was actually doing like online gambling from his phone, like because awesome. When you cross state lines, you can like gamble different, stuff. He made a lot of money too on that, but. Because if you work fantasy sports at Sirius XM, you know a lot about sports, and he's doing pretty good. But anyway, so he's got to hear me like talk comics at his face for like 8-hour drives a day. So he was like, well, maybe we'll make a podcast, And then we were joking around, and said, okay, we'll call it. I don't know shit about comics. Which a lot of the things that we come up, a lot of the ideas we come up with, they usually come from something like that. Like, I don't know if you saw, like, same thing with that fuck Amazon cover. That kind of just came from like a joke that kind of like went out of control. We were at a comic book store. We're like, yeah, blah, 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 fuck Amazon. We'll put it on the cover of our free comic book day promo. And like one store was like, oh, I want 50 copies of that. And I was like, fuck it, okay, I guess we're doing it. So it just gives me a forum, I guess, to, I usually don't talk much on that podcast. I'm usually just sitting and listening. So Brian and then Yvette, who runs Lesser Known Coven, which is our, one of our sister social media sites that does more of like the lifestyle end of like kind of like things having to do with comics and punk rock and witchcraft and this, that, and the other thing. So they run the show, and gives them a chance to like learn from creators that I'm a big fan of, or collectors, enthusiasts. We had comic book shop owners on, and literally it's just me being like, hey, you want to bullshit with me and my friends on Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern. Like, okay, cool. And then we do that. And we use it the same ways you had alluded to earlier. It's a great way to kind of network and and find some things that we can do to be a good member of the indie scene. So like one of the things that we're doing is we're printing a lot of comics, so we're getting at a bulk rate. So if another indie comic book creator said, hey, like, can I throw my books into your bulk print run, so that I'm paying less per issue. I don't care. Right? It doesn't cost me any money, Yeah, send me the PDF or whatever, we'll get that, we'll get that done. So we're starting to do more things like that. And then it allows us to do, more collaborations, variant covers and stuff like that, so all that stuff's fun.
That's awesome. How do you guys go about getting, creators onto Lesser Known, like just for those who are listening, those who are interested, and trying to get their feet off? Like, are you guys going to open submissions at some point, or is that just like a future goal down the line? Yeah, so it's a very informal process, So it's funny, like the same way like we choose like who's going to. So Katie Drinkwine, she got to do like our Western, theme mini, like. And it's only because she called dibs. Like that was the official process, And we just picked up an illustrator, writer. His name's Soren Yarger. He's from Arizona. He just emailed me,
said, "Hey, I got this comic. I think it's pretty good. What do you think of it?" I took a look at it and I was like, "This is really good, man." So,
nice.
And others, I may say, it's not. I wouldn't recommend. I don't think this may be a good fit. There's another publisher who's more, more adept at the style that you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
But even with Soren, he's got a manga style comic, and I was like, I'll try. We don't have any other manga titles, but like, I think it'll sell itself. So here goes nothing. If you're willing to learn with me,
nice.
You don't know until you try, right?
Mm-hmm. So reaching out and sending the emails is good. DM on Instagram. I'm always on Instagram because that's where we kind of focus most of our promotions on.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a couple ways that illustrators and writers can get involved. I think it's easiest for an illustrator, and it could be something like, hey, maybe we can do some sort of variant cover type of thing, or if someone is a great illustrator but hasn't really done a lot of sequential art, but wants to get into it, then we can work together like on a mini. There's a guy out of Washington, Ryan Beer. He's same thing. I was like, "Oh, you got really cool art style." And he's like, "Yeah, I want to make comics." And I was like, "Well, let's do a mini together and see how it goes." And it gives him a chance to see if working with us is something that he enjoys. And it's only 5 pages, so at the end of that, we kind of get a chance to take a step back and say, okay, do we have something here or not? But at the end of the day, at least still has a comic, and at least something we'll print and press, and he'll have to show us friends and family, and potentially put in his local comic shop.
Yeah, it's I think Brian Bendis was saying in one of his comic book writing books, is just like everyone should just try to get one of your comics just made and in print, just to show how easy it really is to do and what it looks like and the feeling you get once you get it. Like every creator needs to have that moment, and it really kind of will change your mindset of understanding your process, the artist process, and just showing like it can be done. Like in today's modern age, it may not be, you could help people get in print, but a lot of it's going to be digital handed to you or digitally drawn and everything, so just getting that opportunity to do that, and it's easier than ever now, like it's doable. You got to find the person and you got to put in the work, and just like anything else, you just got to push it out there. Even if it's kind of crappy the first time, you just got to do it so you can keep on doing it over again.
Well, the nice part for us is that, if someone doesn't feel very confident about, making their first comic, there's a lot of built-in infrastructure with the company that's like, so we already have a graphic designer, we already have a letterer, we already have other illustrators on the team that you can bounce ideas off of, right? So the likelihood for your mini to be a failure is pretty low. If you're putting in the effort, and you're giving it the the love. Because, the way it looks from the time it hits the sketch, by the time it goes through our process, it's always a transformation anyway, and it's a whole team effort there. Just try it.
It's
pretty much
just art at that point, you know what I mean? Just from your first idea into what it manifests into, it's going to be radically different probably, but it's going to be exciting no matter
especially
what.
Especially after like editing and rewrites. It's also funny, when I met Rick Remender, the advice he gave me was like complete opposite of what you're saying Bendis says. Rick Remender was like, you're going to make your book, and this is after you've like got everything started. He's like, you're going to make your book, and he literally was like, it's gonna not sell and it's gonna suck and nobody's gonna like it, and then when you make your second book, it'll get better.
There you go. Yeah.
And I was like, there you go, that's the encouraging words I needed.
That's a Rick Remender like character writing it.
Yeah, I know, that's his entire like character line right there.
Yeah, well, it's like you guys both play music. It's like you listen back to the music, anything you just created, always you're like, oh, I could have done it better.
Yeah.
But actually it ages with time a little bit better. When you listen to something, you're like, that guy had something going there. It's actually, so, time away from your product too will do wonders.
Oh yeah, totally. Like when you stress over something, and not even like stress as in a bad way, when you're just like investing so much time into something and like emotion and energy, you get to a point where like you don't even want to look at it, or you finish it, and after rewriting and re-editing, you're like, oh, this is garbage. And then once you give yourself some time and just kind of step away and breathe a bit, it looks better.
Yeah. A guy, an indie creator, his name Eric Klaus. He does a comic called Ninjas and Robots. So one thing I always encourage, creators is just talk to as many people as possible. But yeah, he was one of the people I kind of reached out. I was like, oh yeah, I really like your stuff, and asked him for some pointers, and he said, you better like creating comics more than you like having a comic, because if you don't enjoy the actual like creation process and like the pain and anguish of that, like like this may not be the business for you. And there's a lot of truth in that statement, and yeah, you kind of be thriving in that madness is kind of a fun place to be.
But like maybe I don't know who I can speak of when I say this, but it's kind of like stressful, but it's fun when you start working with people, and you like, you're with the artists, you're with the other writers, you're like, oh, like, what do you guys think of this idea? And everyone's like, hell yeah, do it. And then you start working together, and like, oh, it'd be dope if we did a panel like this, or if we had the book formatted like that. And then you get amped up over it, and there's a rush in a way. I don't know if that's the feeling to say, but like, it's like a rush you get when you're getting it going and you're making it.
Yeah. I mean, you could also go down a lot of silly rabbit holes, keep bringing up Charlie, because we bullshit a lot. And we had a troll, we get trolls a lot, because once you get like to a certain number of likes, like the trolls start to like pour in. Of course,
the haters come in.
And then what we learned is that if you kind of just like, troll back, not like hugely invested, but just a lot of like, I know you are, but what am I type of stuff. Those people can't help but like keep responding.
Yes.
But it throws off Instagram's algorithm. So they just see a ton of comments and they actually like push the post up super high. But while we were trolling back this guy who, was saying that the Charlie's characters looked like they had low moral character or something like that. They dressed too provocatively or something. I told him we had made a joke. He said something like, "Oh, we're making a comic based on this troll called Escape from Your Mom's Basement." And so me and like Charlie were like kind of chatting about it, and we're like, "Oh yeah, it's about his anime pillow. He brings it to life, and then when it comes to life, it's mortified to find out that like what it is, and then like it's trying to escape his mom's basement, hence the name like Escape from My." And like we built this story, like there's a prologue, an epilogue. It goes too far. We should never spent this much time talking about this story. Yeah. I don't know if we'll ever make it. I would love to make that comic.
At the end of the day, you're just like, damn, this might work. Like,
that's a great pitch, honestly. So hear me out, guys. I got this pillow that lives in this guy's basement, and it comes to life. Like,
just how crushing would it be for that guy where he's like, I don't know, like a weird science type thing to bring it to life, and just how disappointed it is to find out. Like when it comes to existence, it's like, what? Like,
yes,
my purpose is to spoon this incel. Like, no, so yes, if there's an artist out there that wants to work on that with me and Charlie, that's an open invitation.
You heard it here first, everybody.
I mean, we got 1 million like that, so.
Do you find it easier to like pump out stories the more you've been doing them? Like compared to your first comic? I was on the website today because I was kind of like brushing up on everything that's out right now, just to make sure I was up to date. And I think you guys are on number 5 for lesser known comics, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So yeah, you got 5 out now. Do you feel like compared to writing issue 1 versus issue 5, it was a little easier, or maybe the same? I'm not too sure, but
I
it was
think
one of those things, you know.
Yeah, I think the characters tend to take a life of their own. Mm-hmm. So when you start to understand the characters a little bit better, mm-hmm. then writing the next issue is almost, at least that I'm finding, you throw them into a situation and you already know how that character acts. So those panels and the dialogue kind of like write itself, you know, to a certain degree. So it's certainly, I'm finding it easier. I'm also finding it surprising what story arcs are kind of catching more fire and interest with me, where I'm like, oh no, we're actually going to linger in this, you know, part of the universe a little longer than I thought. I thought we were just going to use that as a, you know, as a means to get to another part of the story, but we're just having too much fun here. So, for example, there was one of the ones that Abel is working on. He's one of our illustrators from Spain. You know, Danny and Chris, the characters, are on like this trip to Morocco. You know, because essentially, you know, this main character Danny, she's our Wolverine. She's been around for, you know, 250 plus years. She's lived this like crazy life. She's immortal, but instead of being really competent, you know, like Wolverine, he's like, he's the best at what he does. Like, she's like, no, like, she's like what we probably would do if we had like magical powers. We'd probably like half-ass it. We wouldn't read the fine print on the sorcery. Like, you know, not everyone is like Doctor Strange, where they're like, oh, we're going to read everything. And like, you know, really, you know, so she essentially, by the time that you hit present day and she's got this sidekick, Chris, they're just going from place to place. And he's like, why are there monsters here trying to kill us? Who'd you piss off? You know, like, why is there a demigod trying to like destroy us and set us on fire? So we were just going to do a quick anecdote, you know, that took place in Morocco, and how Abel drew the villain. You know, I was just like, well, we got to spend a lot more time on this villain than I initially thought. And that's fun, you know? So I've learned to not feel a need to go exactly the same direction on the story or the same tone on the story that I initially set out. And I don't know if it's making me more of a lazy writer or a better writer, or a more flexible writer, but like essentially, like now I'm like, here's generally what we're doing. We'll see what happens once, you know, Franco takes a swing at it, or once Andrea takes a swing at it, or once, you know, whoever, you know, Katie, because these, you know, I compare it to going on a road trip. You know, at some point they're going to be in the driver's seat and you're going to take a nap and you're going to wake up wherever they just elected
to stop.
That's like, exactly, yeah. That's like honestly the best way to look at it.
It's kind of cool that you really like understand that about comics, because it's such a flaw I see with so many people trying to make comics that I've come across. Of really just like, you know, not letting that switch over, you know, like, you know, you kind of do you do a lot of rewriting once you get the art back and like kind of rework the script and maybe some of the dialogue, or your ideas totally shifted to where like, oh, this can go in a direction that leads to something else? Like, do you do a lot of rewriting once you get the art?
Yeah, for a couple of reasons. Sometimes I'll be like, oh man, that word balloon is enormous. Because, you know, and I'm not a big fan of, you know, long explanations, you know, like
wordy comics.
Yeah, like the what is it, like the Dragon Ball Z trap, where you have like, you know, let me explain what's happening to Goku in 20.
If you legitimately try to read Stan Lee Spider-Man, it is so painful to get through.
Oh yeah,
dude. Like, if you want an example of wordy comics, that is bizarre how much they try to cram in there.
Oh yeah, and then back when Stan Lee used to put like his little editorial, like remarks in there too. I think that's a cool idea, but after you get through like 90 pages of or 90 lines of Spider-Man's inner monologue, you're just like
you're like, all right,
just fight Doc Ock already.
Yeah. Spawn had that same issue in its first few issues. It was just, I was like, Todd, what are you trying to tell us here? Like, just like say it, say it already. Yeah. Just wrap it up. But I think that's kind of one of the best things you can do with comics, because you have so much freedom with that. You could be super exposition-y, or you could just be very clean cut and let the art and the dialogue just make it feel like a film almost than a novel. There's so many ways and combinations you can mess with it.
I also try not to build, I have ideas. I try and stick closer to themes than actual, the world building, because if I only want to build as much world as is necessary for that story. Because what I found out on the initial scripts, that we were working through, I threw away like 6 scripts just because I was coming up for rules of a universe that we weren't even getting to like anything that was even related. And I was anguishing over like, well, how does the death realm and the spirit realm and all that work, and like I was anxious in trying to set rules for things that like I didn't even need to really figure out quite yet. And I think the themes will I'm pretty set on those, like the story of at least the dynamic with like Chris and Danny, those 2 characters that get featured a lot, is it's a friendship where you have she's constantly putting him in danger, and we've all been in that kind of like toxic friendship, but you love the person so much, and like how much can you take, before you're just like, man, this is not healthy for anybody. And we're really going to, explore that. And that's really anyway more compelling than, whether she's using chaos magic or, whatever. Right.
That's like the beauty of comics. Oh, sorry, Brandon. What was that?
Oh no, I would say that's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the beauty of comics, because like there's moments in any comic you read where something happens and you don't need to explain it. You're just like, comics, just go with it.
It's magical in itself. You know what I mean?
It doesn't need to be explained.
Yeah, my wife, who does not like comics, so I was actually explaining to her today the dynamic between Nebula and Gamora. And she was like, wow, that's messed up. That is some serious sibling family problems. And that's a very human tale told in some super sci-fi, mechanism. And I think that's always more compelling, the same thing with, Winter Soldier and Captain America. That stuff's so good just because what it's like to have that like fatally flawed friend that's like, and you're just doing your best to try and, get them out of a hole they can't dig themselves out of. So people relate to that, and they don't, the rest of it's fun, but that's not why people stick around, I don't think.
Yeah, that's true. It's all about the story that you got to tell and how where these characters go and how, like you said, the situations are in. The more relatable it is, doesn't matter how outlandish it can be. I've related to some very sci-fi aspects where you're just like, oh wow, I would have never, if I hadn't sat down and thought about this for a second, it would have just been like another an alien book, But that's a cool thing, like we were saying with comics, is that they're so magical in itself. Like it takes you somewhere else, and sometimes they make you realize things about your own life without really just like kind of getting after you, really giving you a theme and a lesson to like grow from in an outlandish way, and then it kind of feels like it's approachable at that point, So as we start to wrap this up and everything, what we kind of do some like basic questions with every single person we have on, but for you, I'm curious, you said you're more of a Marvel person.
Now we gotta I gotta unwrap that a little.
Yeah, well, what draws you to Marvel in itself, like the characters, the stories, like, or even if is there a Marvel character that you would like to someday get the chance to just write a arc or a story for?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great question. Because I've totally seen. So when you just Saturday morning cartoons, as a kid, you're like, oh my God, Wolverine, right? Oh my God, Gambit, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God, Rogue.
Yeah.
And then X-Force came out in the 90s, was all about like big guns and,
muscles and belts.
Yeah, a lot of pouches and stuff, right? And the one thing that stood out to me, I was reading, like I said, I went back through X-Men. I'm doing chronological order. And what Scott Summers' life was like at the orphanage, where he's being like gaslit, sabotaged by Mr. Sinister, and all he wants is like to be adopted, and Mr. Sinister is like, basically like tormenting his like social worker as well. That's a real dark story. And I was like, oh my God, no wonder Scott's a dick. Like, like Wolverine, I'm like pissed at Wolverine now. Like, you need to lay off this guy. Like, like you have problems, but Scott, he's got problems too, man. So it's been intriguing to find, I think that would be an amazing, story arc to probably not for film, but like, that'd be a fun, to build that one out, in a longer form.
A nice, like, limited 12-issue series or something, or even ongoing.
Yeah, I think that's I think that stuff's amazing. I've always liked Mr. Sinister.
He's a trippy villain too. Like his whole design, I've always been very attracted to.
Yeah,
the cape. He has the coolest cape. You know what I mean? Like, it goes up and then.
Is there a, it's probably a pretty easy question to answer, but is there any particular reason why you gravitated towards Marvel more? Is it just you just dig X-Men more than anything, or?
I think I couldn't. I've liked Batman, but I think I've always had an issue, with the Superman, problem of having a character that's too good at everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
No moral failings, no physical vulnerabilities, so when Watchmen, had, Dr. Manhattan, that was a very good juxtaposition to that Superman complex, because he becomes completely detached from humanity, because so I just couldn't really relate to that Justice League. Batman's really cool, you can always put Batman anywhere, but the rest,
Prince money.
Yeah. But the rest of the characters, I could, just didn't really speak to me. And I think it's interesting to me, though, like the fact that we don't do superheroes. We don't really do mutants or anything like that, or even like it's not. But I still see X-Men as like a gang of misfits.
Yeah, I can see that.
And that's kind of what we kind of stick to, is a group of outcasts that have something special about them, and it's analogous or to X-Men or Marvel. I don't know why X-Men particularly, but I felt like I wish I was part of that team.
yeah. I can totally understand
something about I can never figure it out myself, because I'm not really a big I guess team book kind of person. I stay away from Justice League, I stay away from Avengers and X-Men. It's expensive and it's really hard to keep track of everything. But something about X-Men, I don't know what it is, but people will like die for that series, and that's fine. It's just I'm always trying to figure out what it is, and I think it just comes down to they're just cool superheroes.
I think they did a great job as well with and I love doing this stuff too, and hope to build out, this for our universe. Is most people like Magneto more than they like Charles Xavier.
Magneto's considered probably one of the. Oh, sorry, I was gonna say he's probably considered one of the greatest characters ever in comics.
Yeah,
and I agree with that.
Yeah, I think when you have villains that you like or root for and stuff like that, so we tend to do that. The story arcs that we have planned, our villains will be protagonists and our protagonists will be, villains, just depending on which, story arc they're in. And it gives me a little bit of chance too, because, one of our characters, the Chris character, is semi-autobiographical, and his shitty behavior is, representative of either my shitty behavior or something, I've seen or experienced. So there's some self-therapy in that as well, to not always frame yourself as the protagonist, because you're, people, like, hey, I'm sure I've been the antagonist in many people's stories, at one time or the other.
Yeah, if you're gonna write a villain, and if they're gonna give like a speech or something, you're gonna have to kind of believe some of that in a way to make it, make someone else believe it as well, and put it out there. And you kind of have to dig to a different spot where it's like, it's not the most popular opinion, but sometimes that's where the villain falls, and putting that out there, you have to. If you don't connect with your characters or find yourself in your characters, no matter how good or evil in some way, they're not going to be honest characters in a sense. They have to. It's not even like giving them humanity. It's just giving it that perspective, and everyone has those type of perspectives somewhere. But also countering that perspective with either the villain or the protagonist. That's the next step of it, and that's where the therapy comes in. That's where you realize, like, oh, one of these is right and one of these is wrong, but it's really hard to choose which one sometimes.
Yeah,
I think also, like, coming back to X-Men, like all those characters, there's just like a character for everybody, and I think that's like the magic with it, is that, I could see why people enjoy reading them or watching them or whatever, or, when creating a character that's like the hero to their own story, or protagonist that's the villain, or whatever, however you want to put it. That's just like an example of like a book that just has so many characters. There's one out there for everybody.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah, so that's the dream job then, right there. Marvel hits you up, hey, come write these.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that would be something that would be like a childhood dream, just the fact that anything that gives you a chance to reimagine something that was so formative in your life, and I mean, I still probably less than a month ago, I rewatched that whole animated series.
Oh, dude, so good. Yeah, so good.
Yeah, it actually holds up too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I quote, Apocalypse so often with the I'm as far beyond a mutant as they are beyond you, like, when I feel like talking shit to my friends, I'll say I am so far beyond.
That whole batch of cartoons was just, it's still so legendary, and nothing really matches up. Like, I remember I was in pre-K when all those were coming out, and like the second half of the day is just nap time. So I would literally either get sick or like throw a tantrum so I could get picked up like around noon or whatever, so I could make it home for Spider-Man, Batman, and X-Men. And that was just like my gateway out of like pre-K every single day. It always worked, and it like was cemented into my brain after that. Oh, my last question, and just because of curiosity, and this was super easy for Patrick to answer, but if you had the opportunity to go towards video games or film of some sort, which direction would you kind of have a preference towards?
I know he went to video games, and I can imagine like a scroll style, like Streets of Rage type version of Condry, where like when you're low on health, you pick up a donut.
Yeah, right.
It'd just be so good.
You have to kick a trash can and the donut flies out.
Yeah. But yeah, I think certainly film. And I would be so intrigued to see things done in different styles, like, those Quentin Tarantino styles, right? Why he hasn't had a Marvel movie, I think him directing a Ghost Rider would be insane. Right.
Dude, I can only imagine what he could get done with that kind of movie.
And then someone made it as a joke. The video is not great, but it could be great. But they did if Wes Anderson.
I've seen those. Yeah.
And it was pretty good.
They did another one for Spider-Man as well.
I'm gonna have to watch that after.
Yeah, it was Wes Anderson wrote Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I gotta check that out. That sounds awesome. Yeah. But dude, Mark, thank you for your time. Go
one
for
more.
Brandon.
Yeah. Sorry, I just want to get one in. One last one. The question I was gonna ask, and it's kind of like a loaded one, so if you can't really get an answer for it, that's okay. But being one of the key people at Lesser Known Comics and being one of the main writers and everything, say later down, however many years from now or even decades, it takes off, it continues, it prospers. Could you see your characters in your books eventually being written by someone else if you were to eventually just retire or whatever it may be, or even someone fulfilling
and
focus on the company, or even further down the line, you fulfill every dream you ever had with this, and you're like, you know what, I'm 80, I'm ready to retire. Do you ever see your books or the company being taken over by someone else, or is it this kind of thing when I'm done, it comes with me,
I think the books, I would love to see that way before I'm 80, right? If somebody says, hey, I want to do a story arc with your characters, and I'm thinking this, there's certainly enough universe, for our characters to go around. The company, I'm certainly, because as we grow, we've had to bring on business analysts and people who kind of help on the business end. That part I'm certainly more protective of. We made a mission statement together as everybody who's part of the company. And not all of that stuff that's in there, is consistent with widely recognized business practices. So, but it's very human stuff. So for example, no one's ever going to be encouraged to put company time over family time. Right. So, I think Patrick is the only other one on the team that's got kids, but I know if he's got to do something with his family, it doesn't matter what else was on the agenda that day, or, we've been really, sensitive about mental health and things like that, so someone says, you know what, I just need personal recharge time before I lose my shit.
Totally.
Jackie, our graphic designer, she told me, she said, we were talking about, because there's that consequence. You can always work fast and work hard and do a long night, and then, the next morning you pay the consequence for that. And most jobs, if you work fast and you work hard, they just load you back up on the plate. You can't say, well, I worked really hard on Monday and Tuesday, so I'd like to totally slack off Wednesday, Thursday. That is a reasonable request in my book. I gassed it to meet a deadline. I'm gonna hang out next to the water cooler and just bullshit on my phone tomorrow. That is so anybody who comes in to help run the company from a business standpoint needs to understand that, and also needs to understand that we're going to do things that don't make exact economic sense. So one of the things that we did was have flat rates for compensation. So on the 1st, the artist gets paid for their work during the 1st through the 15th. It's a flat rate. Whether or not they complete that work, that that money still goes to them. And because if you get sick, or there's a death in the family, or there's a this or a that, right? Someone's power went off, at their apartment complex for like an extended period of time. Like, oh, what, they don't need money now because the power went off, right? So, and a lot of that stuff is just kind of runs counter to, some of the wider, business practices. But that's just something that I'm more intent on guarding than if somebody wants to take our story runs. That to me, I'll be like, oh yeah, I'll be the first one to be excited to see what happens next.
Dude, that's awesome. That sounds amazing.
That's like the best work mentality I feel like to have. Like, I think it's only recently I guess you could say, like, in our history, as the time we've been alive, that like people are starting to recognize that in wherever you work or whatever job it is, you need recharge time and you need compensations, and you need to have healthy practices in the workplace to have people perform at their best capabilities. And,
definitely.
In the creative, especially, like anywhere really, but when it comes to creating content, it's not easy when you're under a lot of stress or deadlines and money, whatever it may be, so it's all stuff that's important.
I don't understand page and panel rates, and maybe someone can explain it to me, because if someone was to pay me for songs, I would write 100 shitty songs.
I mean, that's kind of the radio in a way. I mean,
right? And I guess you are right. So some artists take longer to do stuff. Like Katie produces pages slower than most of the other artists. But then, like, you look at her pages and the amount of detail that she's doing. It makes sense.
That style is different from whatever someone else is doing.
Exactly. So it just to me it becomes an apples and oranges thing, and to be like, oh, I want you to be creative, but within these narrow parameters and under these deadlines, makes no sense to me.
Make me a whole book in 2 weeks. All right, see you later.
And unless you're, doing the big two where that's like an immediate thing, it's like, this is indie comics. We're trying to get our stuff out there. We're trying to like make it fun and the best we can to get to that like excelled professional level. It's a great way to go about it. Plus, it gives them the chance to catch up and to breathe and to, absorb their style, practice, make a mistake, and not just send out a crappy page. I don't know if you've seen the recent cover for John Romita Jr.'s Moon Knight, but like, look at the legs. Like, it's just like, come on, the guy needed more time. Like, give him more time.
It's not easy stuff. It really isn't. It takes time.
But Mark, this has been a great conversation. I'm so glad we finally got to meet. It's kind of weird. Typically, we would have probably talked to you first and then trickle down to the artist and get all that. But we got to hear all these stories about you and hear about the company and kind of absorb and become fans and then meet you and talk to you. So it's definitely an enlightening experience for us. We've been very excited to connect more with you and help the company however we can. Like, we would love to get more of the artists and writers on here. We've had an absolute blast with Charlie, with Patrick. So if you guys are listening, check out those previous interviews. Great people, and each one is just totally unique. Like, every conversation we've had with all of you, just totally on different ends of the spectrum, and it's been an absolute blast. And it just makes me want to just like hang up right now and just like get writing and just like start working on stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it's very inspirational in that sense. And everything you're doing, especially coming out of the pandemic, like, putting out creative work and trying to get creatives to push themselves and stay creative through all of this it's been a struggle and it's hard. And I really hope that Lesser Known just continues to have success and to take off. And, we here at Apollo, we're definitely here rooting for you. And, our doors are open however we can help out. It's really great stuff. We really respect it.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And same thing goes for you guys, whether it's, you need, anything, or you want to, rob a bank together, you just let us know. We're game. We're ride or die here at Lesser Known.
Just casually cross all the way to the West Coast. And
Do you have any plugs you want to put in? Tell us what you're up to, what's coming out, any Kickstarters that we could look forward to.
Lay it all out there.
So the best place, I always encourage people to Instagram's a great platform for us. So that's just at Lesser Known Comics, and then lesserknowncomics.com. It's a great place to get the free downloads, and then we keep that updated as well. The next Kickstarter will probably be pretty soon. We're hoping to get our last Kickstarter stuff in the mail. So that's, our batch 2 comics. That should be out in the mail in the next 2 weeks here. And as soon as people have tracking numbers, nice. Then we're going to turn around and say, hey, here's the next batch of comics. I think we have 4 or 5, in the hopper. We have 12 altogether that we're currently working on. And so whatever doesn't get pushed out for batch 3 will be part of our Halloween batch. Nice. So a lot of stuff. And I always the last thing I would always encourage people is don't be a stranger. Always, feel free to send us a DM and, just shoot the shit. We're very approachable people.
Yeah, no, definitely you guys are.
Yeah.
Firsthand experience for sure.
And cannot stress enough that, going to lesserknowncomics.com lets you read these comics. Literally, I always bring this up, for free. So people listening, there's no excuse. I literally got everything in one download. So, go check it out.
Yeah. Well, Mark, hopefully, once some stuff kicks off, we'll get you back on the show, get some more news and spread the word a bit more. But thank you so much. Hope you have a good night. And guys, thanks for hanging.
Yeah.